Hello everyone, this is Lieutenant McCordy at Venom Company. Today we're going to be looking at the Marksman class and taking a look at your kit, your role, what you're supposed to do, and how you can do it the best way you possibly can. We're at the firing range right now, and I've built myself here a little marksman kit, and we'll go over that real quick just to explain what your capabilities are and sort of how you should probably build your kit. Now, we have two requirements in the company. You have to be running the M110 SAS as well as a 2X sight. Now, I don't have a sight on here because we're going to walk through the sights, but without putting a sight on, I want to talk about what else this kit can do and what I think is the right way to build it. I think you should always run with a light carrier because I find that the marksman is just as good of a killer as the demo or the gunner class can be. I can tie gunner, eight times out of 10 I can tie the gunner in the party, depending on how things go for them. And depending on what map it is, you're looking at upwards of 70, 80, even more kills. So you want to have as much ammo as you can to help that, and the cheapest way to do that is just throw on a light carrier. Okay, that's going to give you 5 mags. The other reason you want that light carrier is because you should also probably be running this extended mags, since that literally doubles your capacity for your weapon, and we allow that in the company. That's going to give you 100 rounds to send people to hell. Your sidearm, extremely important. So we have here the L106A1. It's a 2-point gun. I recommend a quick draw holster and possibly an extended mag, just so you can. I like to do my CQB work with this thing more than the M110, just because I find it's a quicker reload. It moves a little faster. I don't get hung up on geometry. I usually run a bipod on my M110, so I don't want to accidentally deploy that thing. But you can do whatever you want. I just recommend this, and if you want, you can get rid of, say, this flashbang grenade. I kind of like to have one just in case I have to get on site and help out. And it's, as a marksman, you need to pay attention to the deaths in your party, so that if your squad's starting to drop bodies and you're on a defense, you better get on site, right? So you need a way to do that and try to safely make it there and help out and clear buildings. This is optional in some respects, so you can get rid of that, and you can bump up to the Glock, which is the PF940. Putting a extended mag on this thing is going to raise your capacity to 31 rounds, which I think is unnecessary considering you have a light carrier as it is. Light carrier, I believe, gives you 3 magazines for your sidearm. You should have plenty of ammo, honestly. So I wouldn't necessarily waste the point, because we'll talk about your optics and what your other things you can do are. I run a gas mask. If I can try to fit it or afford it, I will run a gas mask on any security class. The marksman is probably the one class where you could throw this out the door, because 9 times out of 10 you're not going to be on site on objective, and you're going to be fairly safe from gas or smoke. But there are some times in close quarters maps, like precinct, there's some definite spots where you could get gassed on site on objective. Hideout and the final OBJs, you never know. So if you can run a gas mask, I recommend doing it. With that said, this kit, from what we've built alone, outside of the M110 here, we still have another 4 points to spend on an optic or a better grip here. Now, everybody and their mother loves to run the suppressor on the M110. I think for 3 points, it's trash in PvE. In PvP, I certainly would recommend running that, and I would probably throw out the extended mags in PvP, and I'd run that suppressor. But we're not in PvP, we're in PvE. I highly recommend throwing the suppressor out the door. Maybe a night map is a better place for a suppressor, just so you reduce your muzzle flash and you have a bit more of a quiet attitude. And the AI isn't like hunting you. But I would throw that out and divert those points towards your optics. So with that said, we could also get rid of this extended mags and put on some more stuff on this thing, but I really like to have a fairly decked out sidearm so I can switch to it fast and put rounds down range. That's kind of how I build my overall kit. Let's talk about optics. First off, we're going to run through some of them, and I'm going to explain what you're looking for in your optics. You may have different preference than me, but in the company, we require you to have at least a 2x optic. I'd probably say a 3x minimum because some of these 2x sights are kind of crazy. But we're going to run through some of these optics that we recommend or allow at least on the weapon. And let's start off with what you're looking for here. First off, you can see you're looking at the zoom capabilities of your optics. And the zoom, obviously, it tells you how far you can magnify, so you can really dial in on a target that's further away. But also you have to think about your low zoom if you have one that, you can either use this thing to clear corners or short distances, because ISS has a lot of those short distances, and I don't want to take away from like a marksman being able to put rounds downrange at 30 meters, 20 meters in front of you with an optic. And I think there are really good ways of doing that with the higher zoom optics. So zoom levels, first thing you're looking for. The two most important qualities you want to be able to, or capabilities you want for your optic, are target acquisition and headshot aids or potential. And then the sort of tertiary thing you're looking for is peripheral vision. Let's talk about that. So I've put on this 2x holo here, and I'm gonna take off the bipod just so I'm not deploying all the time, so we can like look down these optics here. This 2x optic has excellent peripheral vision, and what I mean by that is how much screen space is actually visible on either side of the optic, even above as well. And the reason you need good peripheral is because if you see, if I'm here and you see those two targets to the right that I was looking at before, some optics might actually block my capability of seeing those targets. Or if I have a target, say, peeking over this wall, I want to be able to see that I have a target over here in my peripheral, because after I quickly dispatch this guy, I need to have a follow-up shot on this guy, right? As a marksman, I need to follow up quickly and get on sight, on target, and drop bodies from afar. It's the same principle as a gunner. Difference is the gunner can just kind of hold his trigger down and spray this whole field if he needs to. You don't have that luxury. You have to take a pause and get on sight on a new target. So, talking about peripheral vision and what you can see, we're talking about target acquisition and what that means for your optic, and then your headshot potential. This holo sight has what I would call excellent target acquisition. I have a red crosshair, and you can see these black targets or a dark body or shadows. I can see this crosshair perfectly on top of that. So I can just move this onto a blob of enemy mass that I need and start pulling the trigger, right? I can quickly get on target and start dropping bodies. The downside to this sight, I would say, is that center dot is a little harder to see because of how small the red circle is, and that drops my potential to actually get on ahead in some cases. Like if you put this target here, how much of their head is actually visible on the dot is a lot less because the red circle is covering that up, right? So I can't actually see how well I'm getting on a headshot without paying a little bit more attention and putting more seconds and milliseconds to do that. So I would say this target has excellent peripheral, excellent target acquisition, and poor to mediocre headshot potential. And we have a 1x2 zoom, which I think is too low for a marksman. I mean, you can see how small that target out there is for me to put rounds downrange. And if I'm trying to, put rounds down, I could be missing trying to get onto that and correcting my follow-up shots, because the lower my zoom, the harder it's going to be to notice my recoil and actually get right back on those headshots in center mass. The circle allows me to kind of go in the right direction, but it doesn't actually help my follow-up shots, and that could be another piece of criteria. Let's take a look at another optic, which I would say is the sort of the other side of the 2x sights for what we typically allow, and that's the 1x2 red dot.
Okay, let's do it.
This thing has very similar peripheral. As you can see, I may have actually less peripheral. I have a big, thicker shadow around the glass, and then I have a thick frame there. It's better than a lot of the other optics that you can choose from, but it doesn't really beat the hollow sight, I think. However, I would say this has poor target acquisition because I have this little bitty red dot that is hard to see sometimes when I'm at distance. You can see how dark it is versus when I'm aiming at something up close that's darker. In general, I think the dot is not as bright clearly as that hollow circle. So getting this little dot on a target is not as easy as you think when you're not on the target. However, this little dot is perfect for quickly lining up headshots. Okay? You can line up those headshots much easier. And you can see I may be missing, but at least my dot is at the right height, or it's at the right width for getting on sight for that headshot. So I would say this thing has decent it has really good peripheral. It has poor target acquisition, but very good headshot aid potential. Now you kind of understand, hopefully, what I'm talking about when I'm describing the capabilities of these optics. And we're going to start talking about some of these higher zoom optics. We'll come back to these 7x. We'll go up from what are the highest zoom optics in order. So we're going to hit the 4x optics next. Let's look at the ACOG here.
Okay,
ACOG. Terrible peripheral. You can see how big those wings are, and it's got the nuts on all four corners, and it's got a knob on top. A very small piece of glass with a dark shadow and a thick frame. This thing has awful peripheral vision, but it's got what I would say decent target acquisition. Certainly better than the red dot, right? Because I have not only this red crosshair, which helps me just line up a body. Like I treat the red arrow and sort of crosshair as a red dot, or sorry, hollow circle. Like you're just trying to get that on target.
loading.
And it has even better headshot potential than probably any other optic in the game because the arrow is an excellent tip. As long as his head is above the arrow, pulling that trigger results in likely a headshot. All you have to do is get that arrow right below that top of his head, and you've got a headshot. Really beautiful. So I call this probably the best headshot potential in the game. Decent target acquisition, but the worst peripheral for most of the sights. I mean, even zooming in, you just lose peripheral when you hold your breath. Okay. Moving on, we'll talk about the C79. C79, it's a little bit different than the ACOG. While this thing does suffer in its peripheral, I think it's slightly better than the ACOG because of its sight picture is just a circle. And if you look at how this frame is made, it actually has a sort of planar effect where the entire can is diverting your attention to the center of the reticle versus some of the others which doesn't. I mean, I feel like I'm looking down a toilet paper holder and I'm focusing right in the middle, and it feels really good. Similar to the ACOG, I have this little arrow, and as long as the head is below all the shit that's in the middle, and I'm trying to get the x-axis figured out, the width, then you're going to get a headshot. So I think it has excellent headshot potential. Probably not the best target acquisition and definitely not the best peripheral, but I would say this thing feels better to shoot than the ACOG, even though it may not have the best target acquisition. I think it's an excellent sight. Moving on, the Sud 320. I think this is certainly a favorite for a lot of people because the peripheral feels a little better. Even though I have my sights right here, you can actually see the feet of the guy to the left here. sticking out. So if he was running or moving, I would actually be able to see his feet if I had my reticle like, oh, about right here, you know. But also, why is the sight so good? I'll tell you, because it has a backup sight, backup irons. And it's really the only 3-point backup iron that you can get in the game, which should not be discounted because you can see how effective it is to spray. I don't even have a bipod or a grip, guys, and I'm able to get on target for this guy by holding my breath and putting rounds downrange into his center mass and his head. Pretty impressive what that is going to let you do as you're working corners and moving through a city center or something. So once again, let's talk about the other properties. Headshot potential, pretty good. If you pair this with a laser sight, as you see, the laser sight acts as a red dot, okay? So you can actually get the same effect of a red dot sight to get that headshot potential. The crosshair feels really nice because as long as I get that head or the body inside the thin lines, I can pull the trigger and I'll probably hit the guy, okay? So it helps you line it up with that little crosshair. And the crosshair's not so big and large that I feel like I'm having to do these big navigations. It's much easier to get on target for the smaller crosshair. So this probably is, in my opinion, the best of the 4X sights in general, just because of the backup irons, if anything, right? I don't think the C79 has backup irons. I know the ACOG doesn't. Yep, this one does have backup irons. I'm sorry, I failed to mention that. Not as good because you are having just the little nub sight to line up, which is harder to get on target for a gun that, you know, you don't have as good follow-ups. I think the ring on the Su-320 is much better. So those can't be discounted. Let's go into the 6x3X sights, which I think are the pinnacle of what this weapon deserves. This is the DOS sight. I think it's called the DOS scope. I don't know what that stands for. But it has a lot of very interesting characteristics. First off, we have a red crosshair inside of a black crosshair. Now, I would say this is very similar to what that hollow sight feel is. You can have extremely good target acquisition, right? I can get on target fairly quickly. I just have to get it near it. But what's the problem with this side, in my opinion? First off, I have the cover plate sticking up above, the knobs on the top left, and then this little switch on the left side, which that red switch, I don't actually know what that is. Somebody who's in the military might know. It looks like some kind of cover thing or a rangefinder. I don't know what it is. But that is distracting, and it's blocking my entire peripheral. That guy on the left side, you can see I have to really move my crosshair over just to have him in frame, whereas if somebody's on the right side, it's a lot different. So I think the peripheral is fairly trash. The 3x6X, though, it really is the sweet spot on this scope. At 6X, I think this is perfect to engage a target at any range. If I was engaging a guy who was running at that tree out there and posted up, I would feel very good taking some shots at a guy by that tree. Very slowly, obviously, with hopefully a bipod. But, I feel like I can get target acquired very well. And then if I'm moving up close, let's say, I've got targets at least by those bottles. I mean, I can see every one of those bottles in this frame at this distance here, and that's probably like 15 to 20 meters. I feel very good about these 3X sights. Let's look at some of the others, though, just so you get an idea of what I'm talking about when I really don't like the DOS. There are two other 3X by 6X sights, and that's the ring and the T-scope. This is the ring. Now, this should feel a lot like the hollow sight for a marksman. I've got this red ring in the center, which is probably one of the biggest, most visible target acquisition features of any of these 4X sights and higher, right? Because I see this big ass red ring, I see a man. All I've got to do is move the ring onto the man, and I'm closely acquired. So if you're using this sight, my recommendation is to get the ring on, hold breath, and then course correct slightly to get your shots on. Follow him up. Once again, the center crosshair is black, so it actually is very strongly augmented by a red dot, as you can see. Without the red dot, all I have is this little bitty red thing in the center, which doesn't have any contrast. It's not actually illuminated like the red dot is. So since it's not illuminated, I think it's probably not a great headshot acquisition without the red dot sight. However, this ring is nice for target acquisition. I just don't think... I think the red ring is a little too big, personally. That's my personal opinion, is that the red ring is just slightly too big. I'm trying to log into my computer here. Hold on. Whatever. Okay. So yeah, now that you've seen this, also I want to mention the peripheral vision on this thing is pretty outstanding. And as you see, when I'm zoomed in on 6x, I can see that target to the right or left, which is extremely important, right? Because as I'm not zoomed in, I can pop this guy, right? And then I can quickly move over and shoot this guy, and then the next guy. And as the enemy squads are moving up in a line, I'm able to engage them one by one. That's why I really, really like this zoom level. Let's look at the T-scope. I used to run the ring scope, and then I felt like the target acquisition was actually hurting me because the ring is so big, the red ring. Whereas you see this T-scope here has a much smaller ring. I feel a lot better about getting this thing on a target and feeling like my shots are going to hit and count than I do the other scope. And this thing has a little black dot in the middle. And I think the laser sight is almost completely necessary, but it's also not great the way it's implemented. So you see the black dot is actually covering my laser sight, and that's because on the ring scope, that red crosshair in the middle, it's actually transparent, whereas this black dot is opaque. So it's blocking my red dot from being rendered on top of it, which makes the headshot acquisition slightly worse on this scope than the other. But I would actually argue that once you're in this this black circle, you're going to have a lot easier time staying close to the head just by nature of having a little bit of a red peripheral and a smaller ring. I also like that I don't have a giant crosshair enveloping the entire scope, and that I just have these two wings. What those are letting me do is when I have a lot of targets running, I'm much better at keeping those sides to where as I move across to acquire a target, I'm better at acquiring the y-axis first than I am getting the x-axis lined up. So I can course correct in two ways. And pairing that with some sort of movement, you can see I'm able to sort of work out those issues here by simple movements if I have to, if I don't have a bipod. So I've begun using the T-sight more than the ring sight just by that nature. And you can see as you zoom in, even at 6x here, those targets at 45 meters, I mean, his head is almost completely covering. His body completely covers the ring. So if I get the body in the ring and I pull the trigger, he's dead. No matter what. If his body is in the ring, he's dead. Which is a great feeling for this weapon. Now, sometimes there's a lot of enemies that have body armor, or they're, it takes 2 shots to kill him. But I would argue 2 shots into a guy that are guaranteed is a lot better for a guy that's moving specifically and rushing your objective or your defense. You guys are defending, you got guys running at them. I can pop, and he's dead. And all I have to do is get that black ring on the target. and it feels really good to do that. And if I have to line up a headshot, I can do that. It's just not as good. So I think the headshot potential is a little bit worse, but I actually think the target acquisition is slightly better than the ring sight. It just depends on which one you prefer. I think there's reasons to use both. And there's probably different maps that work better on both. Like, for example, the snow maps are going to look way better on the T-scope than the ring scope, just because the white backgrounds are going to have so much contrast with the black. Sand maps, too, are going to be pretty good. But if you're playing on, like, Refinery, where it's a little darker, or you're playing on... what's that map? Power plant where it's all green, then the ring scope is going to be better because you need that additional contrast. Hopefully you understand what I mean by contrast, where the light and the dark are working really well with the actual sight picture. We obviously have the two backup sights. I've expressed my preference over these in another video. I think for this as well, I would go for the 320 or the 230 over the ACOG, just because that backup sight is much nicer. These are excellent choice, by the way, for this weapon, because as I use this 4x sight, I have just such a great picture and feeling here with this target acquisition. The red dot's really nice for the headshot potential. The peripheral's decent. It's not amazing, but it's decent. And then I've got this backup sight. If I frickin' just hate what this feels like on a certain map, I now have the irons and I can actually just blast somebody as I need to, right? Great choices. So I would recommend to anyone, stick with the 3x by 6x or these 4x1s. And if you're really hurting on the budget, go with this Su-320 4x1 with the iron backup to not spend too many points. But you can afford this for the same price, so I would recommend doing that. Now, as you can see, just putting on an optic, I have 3 points left. You have some options. You could go buy your suppressor, but I would recommend a bipod or even a recoil grip. The recoil grip is really good because I think it's actually good enough to stay on target from a crouched or prone position. If I can get prone up here. Please don't. Okay, don't like... I'm trying to see if I can go prone here. Can I? Nope. That was annoying. Okay. Let's go prone here. And you can see how effective this weapon is prone with just a recoil grip. Outstanding performance. Outstanding follow-up shots. And that was with a 6x. This is with the 3x. Feels so good, honestly, with just the recoil grip. So if you can afford the recoil grip, I might recommend it. You could even put an extra point towards the recoil grip bipod if you really want that additional security. If I just put the bipod on and I stack it up, as you can see, I can pretty much pull the trigger with minimal corrections to stay on an enemy's head and just dominate them. This makes it easy to get a headshot and move to the next target, and without having to readjust as much. So I could just move across a wide range of enemies. The other benefit is if you have 6 guys running in succession, I can just go pop, 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 without having to do any sort of correction, right? Whereas if I'm standing up, let's reload. If I'm standing up, I do have to do slight amounts of correction. And that's just to get on the same target, right? Obviously crouching is better. So if you can avoid standing, I recommend crouching because it really does benefit your recoil control. Your recoil control for this weapon is pretty important at those longer ranges, which is why I recommend utilizing your bipod or your recoil grip, your crouch positions, your prone positioning. That's going to help augment your weapon's capabilities to the max. Here we have a bipod, laser sight, extended mags. And I explained, hopefully, what the laser sight's benefit is other than hip firing. It affects half of the optics in this game in a positive manner, and that's very important. Oh, I forgot to talk about 2 more optics, and let's go upstairs to do that.
Okay.
And that's the 7x scopes. My apologies. There's 2 7x scopes. One is the hunting scope and one is the sniper scope. We're going to start with the sniper scope because I want you to see the difference.
Green to green, dude. Let's go.
This sniper scope has excellent peripheral vision. I mean, I can see targets all around this guy. I have no zoom though. I'm forced to use this 7x distance, which, don't get me wrong, it feels great on these long-range targets. It's extremely augmented by the laser sight. You can see a red dot in the middle. Beautiful target acquisition, beautiful headshot potential, really nice. I think these are very well-made scopes. However, if you look at this one, you'll see there is a big-ass sniper flap at the top, which doesn't always help if you have any sort of verticality on targets that are on rooftops or windows or anything. It feels a little bit bigger and clunkier compared to the hunter scope. So look how clean the hunter scope is on the peripheral. It feels even cleaner than the sniper scope. Now, something about this doesn't have as good of target acquisition, and I think it's because of the way how clean the crosshairs are. They're a little too clean, the straight lines, and that's preventing what I think is a bit better target acquisition. If you train your eye to recognize that the bottom 3 bars of the crosshair are thicker, you can treat that as the CU75, whatever it is, C79 scope, and just try to get the head below that center bar and pull the trigger when you're anywhere near close, and focus on correcting the y-axis before the x. That's actually my biggest tip, is that if you correct the y-axis first, worst case is you're going to get a body shot. Best case is you're going to get a headshot. But if you correct the x-axis first, then you're going to have more troubles. And as the nature of the recoil is to kick up, not as much the side. So you're going to have to correct more of the y anyway. And this is why leading your targets is a good idea, because if you're leading your target, then you don't have to do as much correction on the x-axis when targets are moving. Okay? I think that's all we need to talk about scopes. I'm going to put back on my T-scope. Once again, with this kit, you can afford a recoil grip. You could afford a flash hider with the bipod. It's going to be helpful at night. Right? Night maps are going to have other sights, by the way. They're going to have night vision scopes, which may or may not be of interest to you. I think they're decent in the right circumstances, and then really terrible in others. And I recommend just running a flashlight with a normal optic, because the throw distance on the flashlight is pretty good. I could afford armor here. I could afford the Glock. I could put a better attachment on. I could put a flash grenade on. You have a lot of options if you take off the suppressor on the M110, because 3 points really hampers what you can do. I mean, to get 3 points for that suppressor with this build, I'd be throwing away a lot of stuff. I could put on a quick draw grip, but the quick draw grip's biggest benefit is if you're having throwables, because switching to a sidearm for a 1-point quick draw grip where I could have a bipod or something isn't as effective as if I have a sidearm and a bunch of throwables that I'm trying to use, right, to switch between. So I recommend this sort of build for your weapon. And once again, if you want to throw down to get to save a point, you could try to go with one of these sniper scopes. I don't recommend it, because this is actually a really good clearing weapon, and a lot of people, I've seen them run around with this thing, with this laser sight, and just, you know, clear rooms. Right, and then you know, you can quickly work your pistol if you need to. It's a pretty good room clearing weapon, and don't discount that. Now that we've kind of talked about the capabilities of the weapon, what the best attachments are and best setups, let's talk a bit about what the marksman's job is.
Green to green,
Now,
dude.
in
Let's go.
my command, I instruct the marksman to pretty much give overwatch to either the command team or the whole squad. The gunner would usually give overwatch to the assault team so that they can provide, you know, backup if they need to. But giving overwatch to the command team is a really important job, and doing cross coverage with your gunner is an important job for the marksman. You're looking for those height advantage bipod setup overwatch positions that you can engage targets at long range. This is the final objective for the farm map, and I highly recommend marksmen sit up here and take out targets that are breaching these fences, right? Because the gunner's going to have a hard time getting eyes on there, where the gunner can spray the people running down the fields, they can spray the people running across this open field here. It's your job to engage the targets that he can't see over this fence in between the breaks. So if you see the hard spots, the hard choke points where the targets are coming out of, those tangos are your first objective. You know, the guy that's peeking his head over this fence coming through here. Try not to take over the big juicy targets that your gunner's going to light up anyway, and go for those really difficult to hit headshots and guys that are in those choke points or set up and ready to do some major damage. You see an RPG pull out, or you see a commander or a guy on the back of the technical. Your job is to prioritize targets to the best of your ability, and then provide overwatch to your entire squad, namely the command team and your commander observer group. And that's your job as marksman for the most part. How you do that effectively is all up to both positioning, target acquisition, and headshot potential, right? And we talked about how your scope can help you, your scope and your laser sight can help you do both of those things. Let's talk about some other ways to approach these problems. The final objective is in the building to the northeast of where we currently are. If I look at this map here, there are a couple ways I can defend this objective. Now, I know how this map works, so sitting up there is probably the absolute best way to see targets. You're going to learn the maps over time, and that as a marksman, your job is to honestly learn the frickin' maps. I know there's no window in here that I can engage targets from, but in my experience in learning and roaming around as a marksman and trying to get better angles, which I urge you to go do and go find those cheeky spots on maps, this road is not a terrible position. Here's two reasons why. First off, the enemy technical often comes up this road and parks its ass right here next on the east side of the objective building, and it will lay into this rooftop, this upper section, and kill your demo guy when he's trying to peek out that window, because they have a hard time shooting through this wall and archway. You can drop the driver and the gunner from back here before they've even had a chance to see you or engage you. Furthermore, there are guys that will run and spawn back there and run along this fence line to get in the back where we were watching earlier. I can even move over and post up somewhere here and engage targets in this open field as well, or in this back area here. I can move up if I have to also. But the benefit of this is nobody's coming around this backside, and if my gunner's watching that side, hey man, you don't even need people watching that second floor. Everybody could post up on the bottom floor and shoot up the field. And that's a really cool thing to set up and do. So with the right amount of cross coverage and the right characteristics of your setup here, I mean, you can post some pretty awesome engagements as a marksman and get set up in a really cool and effective manner. I think you can post up here on this thing. Actually don't know. I was trying to get out of that grass. But look at my field of vision here and how protected I am. I have some ground cover if somebody tries to come around me and shoot me. I have some ground cover to deal with them. but I can engage targets coming through this field and cross cover with my gunner. Really cool opportunities for a marksman to separate and find those cheeky positions. As a marksman, your job is to try not to overlap with your gunner, but do the same kind of job. Provide overwatch, prioritize your targets, and engage those guys that are at distance before they've even had a chance to spot your team, before they've even come close to where they're trying to set up. Let's spawn some targets and do a little target practice just so everyone, gets a feel for that. I can go to the computer, spawn an enemy squad, set up. I'm going to set a 6x scope. And I'm going to hit body shots. Alright, I'm dead.
Don't die.
That was unfortunate. Notice how I lead my targets. And I'm putting shots into them, but it takes two bodies to take out some of these guys. And as soon as they stop moving, things become really easy. I mean, you can just line up those headshots. And sometimes, guys, it's actually better to wait for them to stop moving. Because you can conserve a lot of ammo by doing that. Not really on point right now. I can do better. I'll show you that I can do better. A little bit better. Trying to lead the targets and then they'll stop occasionally and you may shoot too far ahead of them, and then you'll have other times where you'll shoot too far behind them. But learning to conserve your ammo such that you're getting the right shot is really important. So don't just waste ammo spraying like a gunner. That's not your job. Your job is to get the right shot at the right time and destroy the target before they've had a chance to engage your team. Now, obviously, I'm the only person here. If I have a whole team of guys in front of me or posted up on a flank, they're the ones who are most likely going to be taking rounds, and the enemies are going to be way easier to shoot because they're not going to be shooting at you. I think that covers most of what I think the marksman should do, what your kit should look like, and how to go about doing it. Practicing on this range, while it's helpful, it's not very realistic in my opinion, because you should have a team that is, also engaging targets and causing the enemies to stop to shoot at you. You saw I hit them. It's just it takes 2 shots if it's not a headshot with this weapon, because most people have armor, etc. One more thing, you can actually go into your settings and you can control your sensitivity for the different sight optics. Please consider doing this because you may find that you have too high sensitivity at 3 or 6x and you need to drop it down, and you can lower it so it's a little easier to use and shoot, right? And what I recommend is trying to do follow-up shots by moving your cursor away from the target and then snapping on. And what you'll find is that you're either overshooting more often or undershooting the target. And if you're overshooting or undershooting more, then you need to adjust in one way or another. So if you're overshooting the target, and what I mean by that is I move too far and pull the trigger versus I don't move far enough and I pull the trigger, right? I'm trying to engage this target. If I don't pull the trigger, if I pull the trigger too early, then I'm undershooting, right? And I need to increase my sensitivity. If I'm pulling it too far and I'm overshooting the target, I need to drop my sensitivity. So I recommend doing some drills with that to get on sight. Yep. Yeah, I think we'll probably post another video for Marksman to talk about like positioning and some of the best spots on the map. I'll show you one more sort of way I go about positioning myself. There's two ways. First off, you can position yourself to get good eyes on the objective, right? And if it's a building or something, then it's really important for you to think about doing that, because the more guys you can take out on that objective before your team even heads over there or gets there, the better. But really, you want to anticipate where your team is headed and then line up shots to protect your team as they move. Additionally, having just a good flank is helpful. So with it, when it comes to this objective here, the objective is in that second floor, and you'll have contacts on this balcony out here. I personally like to sit pretty far back while my team moves across this road to engage targets, because you could have guys coming from around this this side over here flanking. You could have guys who are still on this point that you might hear, etc. And you can get a bipod up pretty far away. But being the guy who engages targets in these windows and going up the stairs is really helpful and cool. Additionally, being the guy who's dealing with this open door in that back balcony is helpful. But you can also just go prone on the road here, and you can see guys who are moving through the courtyard upstairs, and you can get shots on them before they've even managed to get upstairs. Even if you're just putting one shot on them, you're doing significant amount of damage that's going to mean that your guys take one less bullet to kill them. So as they're running through here trying to get upstairs, you can engage them better from back there. You can even sit in that little garage, it looks like. I didn't even think about that. But as a marksman, you want to try to be protected, because 9 times out of 10, you're not going to have a friendly covering your 6, right? So engaging guys that are running through here can be really helpful for your team as they cross the road, as they're getting stacked up, or even as they're already breaching the building. And once that's done and they're defending, do you want to get on the objective? No, probably not. It's probably in your best interest to try and cover this front door here so that they can't go upstairs, or maybe you want to go cover the road, or maybe you just want to cover that back balcony, or that back courtyard again, or sit out here and engage guys coming along this bridge. Get creative with your positioning, because the further away you are from the objective, I understand that it puts your team at risk if your team's dying, but you need to seek out, find the enemy spawns, call out them as contacts for your whole team, and then start thinning the herd as they move to the objective. You don't have to kill every guy, but you want to thin the herd enough so that they're not as big of a threat to deal with. The fewer people your team has to deal with, the better. Also, as a marksman, you need to call out S-vests and give your team a direction. So get used to your compass. If your team's on objective in that building to the east, and there's an S-vest on the road here to the northeast of you, that's not northeast of your team. That's north of your team, right? That's north of that building. Possibly northwest if the guy is moving up pretty quickly. So it's your job to call out relative to your team where things are. Get used to that. Okay? I'll probably do another video where I demonstrate Marksman and what you can actually accomplish in game. But for now, I think this is a good way for you to get started on your kits, etc. I want to thank you all for sticking around. I know it's been a long video. This is Lieutenant Cordai, Venom Company. Catch you later.